Welcome to Lore of the Rings, where we explore the secret paths of Middle-earth and share the stories Tolkien never told. Before we dive in, take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from and whether this tale has found you by day or by night. There are names in Middle-earth that are not spoken lightly. Names that carry the weight of ancient grief, of blood spilled upon stone, of oaths sworn in darkness and never forgotten. Some names are whispered in the halls of kings. Others are carved into monuments of sorrow. But there is one name that was spoken only in fear, only in the cold moments before dawn when shadows grow longest and memory becomes unbearable. Azog, the Defiler, the Pale Orc, the White Death of Moria. Close your eyes and descend with me now into the deeps of Khazad-dûm long after its fall. The great pillars stand broken, the forges cold, the songs silenced. In these halls where dwarves once sang of starlight and stone, there is now only darkness. And in that darkness, something stirs. Not the ancient terror that first drove the dwarves from their home, but something newer, more cunning, more cruel. A pale shape moving through corridors of bone and ash, eyes like frozen coals. Skin white as a corpse left in snow. This is not a beast. This is a warlord. This is Azog, who would rise from the ashes of Moria's ruin to command legions, to break armies, to carve his name into the very flesh of history. But his story, his hatred, was never random. It was not the mindless rage of Mordor's slaves. No, it was personal, it was intimate. It was a vendetta written in fire and sealed with blood, a hatred that burned across decades and consumed everything it touched. And standing against him, alone among fire and ruin, was a single dwarf. Thorin, son of Thrain, heir of Durin. A prince who had lost everything, his home, his father, his birthright, but who refused, even in the face of annihilation, to kneel. Two symbols of wrath. Two monuments to vengeance. One orc who would not die, one dwarf who would not yield. Their collision would shape the fate of the North. Their war would echo through generations. And their final meeting beneath the shadow of the lonely mountain would become legend. A tale of pride and poison, of honor corrupted and vengeance unfulfilled. But before they met upon that blood-soaked field, before their blades crossed for the last time, the hatred between them was already centuries in the making. A hatred that began not in sunlight, not in open war, but deep beneath the mountain, in the oldest halls of the eldest kingdom of the dwarves. To understand their war, we must first understand the fall. In the deeps of time, before the shadow lengthened, before Sauron's hand reached north, there stood a kingdom that was the envy of Middle-earth. Khazad-dûm, the Dwaraudelf, Moria. Three names for one truth, the greatest of all dwarf realms, carved from the living rock of the misty mountains, stretching from the roots of the world to the high peaks where eagles nested. A kingdom of light and splendor where mithril flowed like silver water and the hammers of Durin's folk rang out in songs of creation. For an age, the dwarves dwelt there in peace. They traded with elves. They built roads and bridges. They dug deep, always deeper, for the treasures hidden in stone. And therein lay their doom. Greed. The oldest sin. The deepest wound. In their hunger for mithril, in their endless delving, they awakened something that should have remained sleeping. A terror from the elder days. A Balrog of Morgoth, buried since the breaking of Thangorodrim, sleeping in the roots beneath the mountain. When the picks of the dwarves struck through into that ancient darkness, the fire came roaring up from below. Durin Vi, king under the mountain, fell before it. His son Nain fell, and the dwarves, for all their strength and stubborn pride, could not prevail. They fled. Khazad-dûm became a tomb, Moria the black pit, and into that void, as always happens when light retreats, darkness poured in. Orcs. Goblins, trolls, creatures that had hidden in cracks and crevices now swarmed through the greatest halls of the dwarves, desecrating the throne rooms, defiling the tombs, turning beauty into rot. Among those creatures was one who would rise above the rest. Not through strength alone, though he was strong. Not through cruelty alone, though he was merciless, but through intelligence, through ambition, through the cold, calculating hatred of a mind that understood power. His name was Azog, and from the smoke of those burning halls, from the ruin of a once great kingdom, his shadow began to grow. a shadow that would stretch across the north, a shadow that would consume kings. The dwarves did not forget. How could they? Every exile carried the memory of home, the scent of stone and starlight, the songs their fathers sang. They settled in scattered halls, Erebor, the Iron Hills, the Blue Mountains, but their hearts remained in Moria. And as years turned to decades, and decades to centuries, the desire to return, to reclaim, to avenge grew sharper. Thror, descendant of Durin, king of Erebor, felt that pull most keenly. When Smaug the Terrible descended upon the lonely mountain and drove his people into exile once more, Thror became a wanderer. Homeless, kingless, yet still proud. And in his pride, in his grief-maddened obsession, he made a choice that would doom his house. He decided to return to Moria. Alone, or nearly so, he entered the East Gate. He walked through the halls of his ancestors, torch in hand, calling out in the darkness. Perhaps he believed the Balrog was gone. Perhaps he no longer cared. But what awaited him was not flame. It was something far more patient. Azog. The pale orc had claimed Moria as his throne. He ruled there not as a beast, but as a king, a dark mirror of the dwarf lords who came before. And when Thror, broken and old, stumbled into his domain, Azog saw an opportunity not just for murder, but for desecration. For a message written in blood that would be carried back to every dwarf kingdom in Middle-earth. He killed Thror slowly. He carved his name, Azog's name, into the dwarf king's brow. Then he flung the body out onto the steps of Moria like refuse, with a bag of coins mockingly scattered over the corpse. A final insult, a declaration of dominion. And from that single act of calculated cruelty, the bloodiest war of the Third Age was born. Azog the Defiler. Let us linger on that name. Let us see him not as the films may have painted him, not as a shadow or a plot device, but as Tolkien imagined. A creature of terrible intelligence, of ruthless ambition, of calculated hate. His skin was pale, almost translucent, like something that had lived too long in darkness, like bone bleached by time. His eyes were not the mindless red of common orcs, but sharp, aware, burning with purpose. He was massive, even for his kind, and his strength was legendary. But it was not his body that made him dangerous. It was his mind. Azog understood fear. He understood how to wield it. He knew that killing a king was not enough. You had to break the spirit of the people who followed that king. You had to make them doubt, make them despair. When he murdered Thror, he did not simply kill an old dwarf. He killed a symbol. He desecrated a legacy. And when he sent the body back, marked and mocked, he issued a challenge that no dwarf could ignore. The eldest of the 7 houses convened. From every corner of Middle-earth, dwarf lords gathered, Iron Hills, Erd Luin, Erd Mithrin, and they spoke with one voice, vengeance. Thus began the war of the dwarves and orcs, a conflict so brutal, so total, that it would reshape the north. For 6 years, the dwarves hunted Azog's forces through every cave, every mountain pass, every dark corner of the Misty Mountains. They burned orc strongholds. They slaughtered without mercy. The orcs, in turn, fought with the desperation of cornered beasts, and the mountains ran red. Azog commanded from the shadows, always retreating, always regrouping, leading the dwarves deeper into his trap. He knew the terrain. He knew the dwarves' rage would make them reckless. And so he lured them, slowly, inexorably, toward a single killing ground, Azanulbizar. The valley outside Moria's East Gate, the Dimril Dale, a place of beauty once, now to become a graveyard. There on a cold winter's day, the dwarves and orcs met in final battle. Thousands on both sides, blood soaking into snow, the clash of axes and scimitars echoing off the mountain walls, smoke rising from funeral pyres even as the battle raged. And in the heart of that chaos, a young dwarf prince fought for his life. His name was Thorin, son of Thrain, grandson of Thror. He was not yet called Oakenshield. Thorin had seen horrors already. He had watched his grandfather vanish into Moria and never return. He had held his father as grief slowly twisted Thrain's mind. He had lived in exile, watched his people scatter, felt the weight of a crown that no longer had a kingdom. But nothing had prepared him for Azanulbizar. The dwarves came to that valley with fire in their hearts, determined to end Azog's reign, to reclaim their honor, to avenge their king. They believed righteousness would carry them. They believed rage would be enough. It was not. The orcs poured from Moria like a black flood. They came in waves, goblins from the deeps, wargs from the wild, orcs from Gundabad. And at their head, massive and unstoppable, was Azog himself, wielding a great mace, his pale skin splattered with dwarf blood, his voice rising above the carnage in a language of hate and mockery. Thorin's kin fell around him. Frerin, his younger brother, was cut down and lost in the press of bodies. Nain, lord of the Iron Hills, charged Azog directly and was crushed beneath the orc's mace. Thorin himself was surrounded, his shield shattered, his axe slick with blood, his breath ragged. And then, with no weapon left, no shield to hide behind, he did something that would define him forever. He seized an oaken branch from the ground, a piece of a tree scorched by fire, and used it as a shield. He drove forward, roaring defiance, and cut his way to the gates of Moria itself. In that moment, amid smoke and screaming, Thorin became Oakenshield. The dwarves rallied. Fresh forces arrived from the Iron Hills. The tide turned. The orcs broke. They fled back into the mountain or were slaughtered where they stood. And Azog, pale Azog, the Defiler, the monster who had desecrated a king, fell. Or so they believed. His body was never found. Some said he died in the dark, bleeding out in some forgotten tunnel. Others whispered that he crawled into the deeps of Gundabad, nursed back to life by servants of shadow. And Thorin, standing among the corpses of his kin, felt no triumph, only emptiness. Victory, he learned that day, is a hollow thing when everything you loved is already lost. But the whispers would not stop. The doubts gnawed at him. What if Azog still lived? What if the monster he thought he had slain was even now plotting, waiting, sharpening his hate? For Thorin Oakenshield, the war had ended. But the torment had only begun. The histories tell us that the war of the dwarves and orcs ended at Azanulbizar. They tell us the threat was broken, the enemy scattered, the north made safe. The histories lie. Oh, the great battles ceased, yes. The armies dispersed. The dwarves returned to their scattered holds and the orcs retreated into shadow. But wars do not end because men decide they are tired of fighting. Wars end when one side is destroyed or when both are too exhausted to continue. This war was neither. In the decades that followed, strange things happened in the north. Dwarf merchants vanished on mountain roads. Settlements near the misty mountains were found empty, their inhabitants gone without trace. Hunters reported pale shapes moving through the high passes at night. Drums, faint but unmistakable, echoed from the depths of Gundabad. Azog, it seemed, had not died. Or if he had, something equally terrible had taken his place. His son, perhaps, or his lieutenant, carrying on his work with the same cold intelligence, the same patient malice. The name Azog became more than a single orc. It became a symbol, a curse, a shadow that refused to be dispelled. Thorin heard the reports. He heard the whispers, and slowly, inexorably, obsession took root in his heart. He could not forget, could not move on. Every night he saw his brother's face. Every morning he woke to the knowledge that somewhere in the dark, the creature who had destroyed his house might still draw breath. His father Thrain felt it too. Driven by grief and the same gnawing uncertainty, Thrain set out one day to reclaim Erebor, to restore their kingdom, to end the cycle of loss. He carried with him one of the 7 rings of the dwarves, a treasure and a curse. He never returned. Years later, Gandalf would reveal the truth. Thrain had been captured, imprisoned in Dol Guldur, tortured by the necromancer, Sauron in disguise until madness took him. His ring was stolen. His mind was broken. And Thorin, once again, was left with questions and no answers, grief and no closure. The war of the dwarves and orcs had never truly ended. It had simply gone underground, become invisible, a cold conflict fought in shadows and silence. And in the fortress of Dol Guldur, in the dungeons where light did not reach, Sauron watched. He saw the hatred that burned in the north. He saw the old wounds that refused to heal. And he understood that hatred, like fire, could be fed, could be weaponized. If Azog still lived and the evidence suggested he did, then he would be useful. A tool, a blade aimed at the heart of the dwarves. For years, the mountains were quiet, too quiet, until one night far in the north, the drums of Gundabad began to sound once more. Let us move now through time to a moment of convergence, to the years just before the quest of Erebor, when fate began to weave its threads into a noose. Thorin Oakenshield was no longer a young warrior. His beard was streaked with gray. His body bore the scars of a lifetime of loss. He lived in exile, working as a smith in the Blue Mountains, barely scraping by, his people scattered and leaderless. The crown of Erebor was a memory. His father was gone, his grandfather murdered, his brother dead. But the fire of reclamation had not died. It had only grown hotter, compressed under the weight of years. When Gandalf the Grey appeared at his door with a proposal, a quest to reclaim Erebor, to face the dragon, to restore the kingdom, Thorin did not hesitate. This was not about gold, though Smaug's hoard was legendary. This was not about glory. This was about unfinished business, because Thorin knew, deep in his bones, that reclaiming Erebor meant confronting the past. It meant walking once more into the jaws of the enemy. And if Azog still lived, if the Pale Orc still haunted the north, then their paths would cross again. He wanted that, needed it. The quest was his chance not just to reclaim a throne, but to end the war that had defined his life. To kill the ghost that haunted him. To silence, once and for all, the drums of Gundabad. But Thorin did not know, could not have known, that Sauron had already set his plans in motion. In the ruins of Dol Guldur, the necromancer commanded his servant to rise. Azog, pale and scarred and filled with a hate that had only deepened over decades, was given a single task: hunt Thorin's company, find them, break them, kill the heir of Durin before he could reclaim Erebor and unite the north against Mordor. And so, as Thorin and his companions set out from the Shire, laughing and hopeful, Azog was already tracking them, already gathering his hunters, already preparing the trap. Two ancient enemies moving toward each other through the wilderness. Two leaders driven by obsession, Thorin by vengeance and pride, Azog by domination and spite. Their collision was inevitable, and when it came, it would not be a battle, it would be an ending. The quest of Erebor is often told as a tale of adventure, of riddles and dragons, of trolls and spiders, of a hobbit finding courage and a company finding gold. But beneath that surface, threading through every step, was another story. Darker, older, the story of two warriors who could not escape their fate. Azog pursued Thorin across the wilds. His wargriders attacked the company near Rivendell, driving them toward the mountains. At every turn, the Pale Orc was there, watching, waiting, closing in. He was not acting alone. Goblins ambushed them in the misty mountains. Wargs hunted them through the forests. Even Beorn spoke of increased orc activity, of armies gathering in the north. This was not random. This was orchestrated. Sauron needed Erebor to remain empty, its treasures unclaimed, its strategic position abandoned. A restored kingdom under the mountain would mean dwarf armies on his northern flank. It would mean resistance, unity. And so Azog became the blade aimed at Thorin's heart, the executioner sent to ensure the line of Durin ended forever. But Thorin, for his part, was not fleeing. He was charging forward, obsessed with his goal, blind to the costs. Pride had taken root in him, the same pride that had destroyed his grandfather, the same pride that had doomed the dwarves of Moria. He would reclaim Erebor. He would sit on the throne of his fathers. And if Azog stood in his way, then he would finish what he started at Azanulbizar. The two were mirrors, each defined by hate, each unable to see beyond the war. And as the company finally reached the lonely mountain, as Smaug fell and the treasure was reclaimed, the drums of war began to sound in earnest. The battle of 5 armies was coming. Dwarves, elves, and men would clash over gold. But above all of it, orchestrating from the shadows, was Azog, leading an army of orcs and goblins down from Gundabad, intent on one thing and one thing only: the death of Thorin Oakenshield, Ravenhill, A spur of rock jutting from the lonely mountain, crowned with ancient ruins and watchtowers built by dwarves long dead. A place of ghosts, of memory. It was here, as the battle of 5 armies raged below, that Thorin made his final charge. He saw Azog upon the hill, commanding his forces, and something inside him broke, or perhaps finally crystallized. He would end this. Now, accompanied by his closest kin, Fili, Kili, Dwalin, Thorin ascended Ravenhill. The air was cold. Snow fell softly, muffling sound, coating stone in white. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then they met, Thorin and Azog, face to face. Not as king and warlord, not as dwarf and orc, but as 2 monuments to vengeance, 2 symbols of a war that had consumed everything. The duel was not graceful. It was brutal, desperate. Thorin swung his sword, Orcrist, with the fury of decades. Azog countered with savage strength, his blade, a crude, jagged thing seeking to maim, to crush. Around them, battles within battles raged. Fili fell, stabbed from behind. Kili died defending his brother's body, but Thorin did not stop. He could not. The snow turned red. Breath misted in the freezing air. Steel rang against steel. And for a moment, just one moment, it seemed Thorin might prevail. But pride is a poison. Thorin overextended. Azog saw the opening. The orc's blade plunged forward, piercing Thorin's chest, driving deep. The dwarf gasped, stumbled, fell to his knees. Azog loomed over him, triumph in his eyes. The line of Durin ended at last, but vengeance is a circle. With his last strength, Thorin drove Orcrist upward into Azog's chest, piercing the heart of the pale orc. For a moment they stood locked together, enemy and enemy, killer and killed, and then both fell. Snow covered them. Moonlight washed over the hill, and the sounds of battle faded into silence. In slaying his enemy, Thorin also slew the shadow that had ruled his heart. But the cost was everything. The dwarves won the battle of 5 armies. The orcs were driven back. Gundabad fell silent once more. Erebor was reclaimed, its halls restored, its forges lit. But they carried Thorin's body down from Ravenhill on a shield of oak, the same wood that had given him his name. Fili and Kili lay beside him, 3 heirs of Durin, dead in a single day. Balin, who had followed Thorin since childhood, wept openly. Dwalin, the warrior who never showed emotion, stood silent, his axes lowered. Bilbo, the hobbit who had come seeking adventure, looked upon the face of his friend and wondered if anything they had gained was worth what they had lost. Thorin was buried deep within the mountain, beneath stone and starlight, with Orcrist laid upon his chest and the Arkenstone, the great jewel he had coveted that had driven him to madness, placed in his hand. Above him, they carved words in stone. Here lies Thorin Oakenshield, king under the mountain, who fell defending what was his. But those who knew him understood a darker truth. Thorin had not died defending his kingdom. He had died chasing a ghost. He had spent his life consumed by vengeance, by the need to undo the past, to avenge his grandfather, to kill the monster that haunted him. And in the end, he succeeded. Azog was dead, the war was over. But what had it cost? His brother, his nephews, his peace, his soul. The curse of Durin's line, the curse of pride, of greed, of obsession, had claimed another king. And Azog, the Defiler, the white orc, the pale death of Moria, was gone. But his hatred had already poisoned the hearts of dwarves, elves, and men alike. His war had fractured alliances that should never have broken. His malice, even in death, lingered like smoke over the battlefield. For in Middle-earth, evil is not defeated by a single blow. It is not vanquished by heroism alone. It seeps, it lingers, it corrupts. And sometimes, most times, it is only ended when both sides, victor and vanquished, lie broken in the snow. The battlefield grows quiet now. The bodies have been burned or buried. The banners are lowered. The songs of mourning have faded into silence. But if you stand upon Ravenhill on a cold night, when the moon is full and the wind carries the scent of snow, you might still hear it. The clash of blades, the roar of rage, the final, gasping breath of 2 warriors who could not escape their fate. Thorin and Azog, dwarf and orc, 2 symbols of pride and vengeance, locked in a war that began long before they were born and ended only when both were consumed by it. Their story is not one of triumph. It is not a tale where good defeats evil and the world is made brighter. It is a tragedy, a reminder that hatred, no matter how justified, destroys everything it touches. That vengeance, no matter how righteous, offers no peace. That the wars we fight in the name of honor often leave us more broken than the enemies we slay. The White Orc is dead. The line of Durin is shattered. Erebor stands restored, but its king lies cold beneath the mountain. And the question remains, whispered on the wind, carved into stone, echoing through the empty halls. Was it worth it? The dwarves would say yes. They reclaimed their home. They avenged their king. They proved that even in exile, even in ruin, the children of Durin do not yield. But Thorin, in his final moments, lying in Bilbo's arms, said something different. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. A confession, a regret. An acknowledgement that the war he had fought, the vengeance he had pursued, had cost him everything that mattered. And so the tale ends, not with victory, but with grief. The halls of Erebor are filled once more with light and laughter, with the ring of hammers and the songs of dwarves. But in the deepest vaults, in the tombs where kings are laid to rest, there is only silence. Thorin Oakenshield lies in stone, his war finally over. And somewhere, far beneath the earth, in the ruins of Moria or the depths of Gundabad, the bones of Azog the Defiler lie forgotten, his name slowly fading into legend. Two enemies, bound by hate, whose war shaped an age. Their story reminds us that in Middle-earth, and perhaps in our own world, evil is not always defeated by good. Sometimes it is only consumed by the grief it creates. Sometimes the only victory is silence. And sometimes the greatest battles are not won at all. They simply end. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.